to, I don't know if you've had a chance to log in yet, but we've uploaded the presences that you'd sent along. And we can definitely use one of them. Actually, we'll probably use the, I believe it's Bar Louie as the reference point. That's the one that's been there for a while, so there's a bit more data. But as we go through them, you'll probably note there's a couple I know that we uploaded that didn't have that many keywords. In fact, there was a couple that only had a single keyword. So that, I'm assuming, something you're going to want to sort of build out over time, but we're going to walk through that stuff anyways.
Okay, cool. Yeah, when I did it, I was trying to figure out, I was like trying to just get her over to you at some point. I had been so busy.
Yeah, no problem.
So much crap. So
it's all good. All good. Now and the key is that we at least get the presences there, and then, as far as adding and building keyword lists over time, as long as the presences are there, you're mostly configured, and you'll see when we still need to, or I'm assuming you guys will still want to connect, Google Analytics and Search Console and those types of things to these accounts as well. But at least having them there saves you that whole hassle of having to add them manually.
So could you explain the presence to me one more time? Because I think I understand.
Why don't we do that while we're waiting for Matt? Because he's seen that actually, and I didn't have a chance to send over the recording. But one of the things I'll also mention right off the top is we also have a certification program that I mentioned to Matt. I'll send along a link, and it's basically a combination of videos and some questionnaires to sort of test knowledge. And it's a lot more of me talking, but it's self-led and it's there as a resource. And it goes through everything from sort of soup to nuts of what is a web presence, what are keywords, what are keyword clusters, all of those types of things. And you'll have that as absolutely as a reference point. We generally recommend everybody think about getting certified, because that way, you don't miss anything that I might even miss in these types of sessions. So we'll jump into Bar Louie, and when Matt jumps on, as I say, I walked through this with him, the web presence stuff. So we can do that as a quick refresher.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Actually, let me just go back out to the top. So just to give you some context, there's 3 levels in gShift. There's an agency level, there's a client level, and then within each client, there's a presence level. Now, because your clients are, smaller or local, I'm assuming most of them are just going to have a single web presence. Although some of them, if they're franchises, a web presence for us is made up of a website, a group of keywords, and content, as well as analytics associated with that website. So for some organizations, see somebody just threw me a chat request here.
Matt here.
Okay, Matt says he's but not spelling properly. Great. Yeah, so when he can jump on and join us. As I mentioned, I'm recording it anyway, so we're all good.
Okay.
There we go. He's on. Perfect. For us, a web presence is really everything having to do with an organization's online visibility. So if I jump into Bar Louie as an example, so we're going in at the client level. Within this client, there's this one web presence, and pretty much everything you see above these blue buttons represents their presence. So there's a website. You could have multiple sites, because sometimes clients have, third-party blog sites, or they might have a blog that lives on a subdomain. We consider that a separate website. And that really just allows us to find any content associated with that domain that's ranking. And obviously that's ranking for keywords that you're following. So, the two most important aspects of any presence, the site and keywords. We then also break content down into 2 buckets. There's on-site content, which is anything to do with your site or your sites or domains, which we're following. But then there's also off-site content, and this is just important to think about in terms of anything external that the brand or the client owns or has some level of control over and represents part of their web presence. It's somewhere they can be found or can be contacted. So for local clients, that might be a Yelp listing. It might be their Google My Business page. It might be, any local directory listing where they can be found. You might want to follow that as offsite content because that gives you a full sense of their online visibility. Does that make sense?
So like Facebook. Yeah, so Facebook would be something like that.
Well, Facebook's a little bit different because you'll see we also have these social
Got you.
icons. You can authenticate into their social accounts, and then those become, for us, those become sort of offsite. Those become content as well. But yeah, that Facebook's a good example. Anything outside of their primary website, if it shows up in the search engine results, you probably want to follow it as offsite content because then you can say, you've got, this many positions on page one. One of them might be your website or content from your site, but then others might be, local listings of different types, different ways of finding that brand.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Make sense? Yeah. So as I say, you can also authenticate in those social accounts. So Facebook, Google+, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. One of the things I'll also mention about YouTube is we consider it both a social network, but also a search engine. And we'll talk about kind of search engines as we go, but basically, if you want to find out how well videos are ranking for keywords you're following in YouTube, we look at it that way. So we can kind of give you rank for videos, if you will.
Oh, okay.
Then the other important things we can configure here, and we've already done that for Bar Louie, is analytics, as well as access to Google Search Console. Search Console, we pull in search query data through the API, as well as some error data. So if there are 404s or other indexing issues with the site, that's the kind of stuff we pull in through Search Console. So in all, this sort of represents their web presence. Now there's one other piece here, and that's competitors. Not really their presence, but we want to be able to configure this and figure out and measure ourselves, obviously, against the competition. Where are we relative to the competitors for specific keywords? Or maybe we want to do some potential backlink research by looking at, well, where are those competitors getting their backlinks, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, great. So yeah, a key component of this is obviously just the configuration at the front. The more of this stuff we have configured, the more data we're going to have available to be able to analyze and kind of make decisions. So below that, then you've got these buttons that you have access to, which are basically, jump off points to getting to different areas within this SEO platform. So there's presence data, and that's really where the day-to-day data resides. So our keyword research, content, competitive data, backlink data, social data. We're going to jump in there in a moment, and that's where we'll spend most of our time just looking at and understanding how to kind of use gShift. But we also have quick access to our site audit tool. So if you want to run a technical audit on the site, get back a prioritized list of recommendations. What are the issues with the site? Are there problems with titles or headings or meta descriptions or, title alt tags on images, those types of things? There's a full site audit tool available to you. Two ways of looking into data. The first is to go into presence data, and that's sort of dashboards and day-to-day stuff. The other is reports. So reports are configurable reports. We usually cover these in a separate session. So the next session would be looking at reports, which for me are more historical. Let's set up scheduled reports or run ad hoc reports that show how things are progressing over time. Usually are comparative, show me how I'm doing this week versus last week or that sort of thing. So we'll spend more time on reports in just a separate session.
Okay.
All right. We're going to look at the dashboard, this overview dashboard that we have, but I'll let you know you also have access to build your own custom dashboards. We have a whole set of templates we offer as well as a library of widgets, or what we call beacons, to really build up dashboards that help you identify the data, or kind of analyze data at a level that makes sense for you, whatever, whether it's keyword data, content, analytics, competitive, or discovery. Those are sort of some of the templates that we offer. And you can build out custom dashboards. So we'll spend a little bit of time there today after we look at our primary dashboard.
Okay.
All right. Last but not least, there is an activity management aspect within gShift. If you want to track or keep track of the things that you're doing for clients, the activities you're performing, there is a whole activity component. I always like to ask whether or not that's something you think that your organization is going to be using or leveraging. If it is, then we can spend some time on it. If it's not, if you're doing activity management, outside of gShift, or you've got sort of a process in place, I can certainly share it and show it. It's basically a way of adding activities that were performed, completing them, and then ultimately reporting on them. And that's all sort of available within the platform.
Yes, we will be using that all the time. I actually set up a couple of test ones for Able Heating yesterday.
Awesome. Great. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. So, and I set them up as reoccurring tasks.
Awesome. Yeah. Perfect. So we'll spend a little bit of time on that too. Great. So so that kind of represents a presence and the configuration of a presence, and kind of how to get into some of the primary areas within the software. Any questions on that, Desmond? And again, I went into a little bit more detail on all this stuff, like following keywords and that sort of thing in the last session. The plan today was to kind of go more into, now that it's configured, how do we start to use it? But any questions so far on that?
No, it makes perfect sense right now.
Perfect. So one of the primary things we always talk about, sort of taking a top-down approach, and dashboards. We started kind of offering this dashboard view of things a couple of years ago, because we realized we had a whole lot of data, big data around keywords and position and content performance and that sort of thing. And because there was so much data, a lot of it tended to get lost. And so our approach then was, okay, let's offer up dashboards as a way of getting top-level quick insights on what's happening, and then provide the ability to drill down into the details if necessary, to understand, what to do about it. So if things are, trending in the wrong direction, or they're trending in the right direction and we want to tell that story, then we can drill down to kind of get the meat or the details underneath. But dashboards are effectively our way of doing that. So where I usually like to start is by sharing a dashboard that currently isn't configured for you guys, but something that's available, and it's up at the agency level. And so I'm going to look at a demo site that we have, or a demo account. So your agency, just the same as local page pop. And at that agency level, there's a dashboards section. And to give you an example of what a dashboard could look like, we have an agency dashboard. And glad to hear you're thinking about activities, because that can be incorporated into this. So especially when you have a lot of clients, we built this beacon. We call them beacons within dashboards. And this one is about being able to identify where to focus attention when you have a bunch of clients that you're responsible for, or that you're managing all at the sort of same time. And so what this beacon does, and it's configurable as well, these columns can be turned on or off depending on what data you think you need to see on a, say, daily or weekly or whatever basis. But what you're looking at is sort of in the first 5 columns, keyword data. So a visibility score, which is a relative measure of how you're doing for a group or cluster of keywords. And I should mention, all of these dashboards that we'll be looking at are focused around, again, clusters. And one of the places I should have started is up here at the top. If you're looking to configure a dashboard, there's a gear where you can change the beacon attributes. And what you can change is the date range. In this particular case, at the agency level, which agency we're focused on. That's pretty obvious. But then down on the lower dashboard level, you'll be able to change the cluster and the search engine that you want to focus on. And I'll maybe show you that once we get a little bit deeper. But there's a configuration button at the top of every dashboard. I'll also point out there's a configuration button associated with each and every what we call beacon or widget, and that allows you to configure this specific piece of data. So if I click on that configuration button, you'll see that this particular, again, beacon has a whole bunch of columns and options that we can turn on or off, and pretty much everything is on by default. But some of this might not be applicable for you. So, if, for instance, you don't care about the number of search results for the keywords being tracked, or you don't care about the age of domain, because those were kind of specific bits of data we added in for a client, who asked for them specifically. But we don't have a whole lot of clients that actually use that data, so we can turn those off. We can also go in and change the highlighting that you see. So you'll see some of these cells are green and some are red. The red and green are about identifying increases of a certain percentage or decreases of a certain percentage. And really that's a quick way of saying, show me the really good stuff or show me when things are trending in the wrong direction. And some of our clients use this as sort of the place they start their day, because they can quickly go in and just look for the red and figure out, okay, who's falling off. What clients have metrics that are headed in the wrong direction. So for instance, it looks like these clients, a couple of these clients, their visibility scores dropped, and a share of voices dropped. We've got other ones where they're losing some positions by the looks of it. And the goal here, again, with the dashboard is we have this data at the top level, and if at any point I want to understand, okay, well, what exactly does that mean, or what do I need to do about it, I can drill down by clicking on any of these cells. So, and an example I always use is Global Sawmills because it's our sort of flagship demo client. So I'm just going to click on this visibility score that has dropped, but it's not considered in the red, but it's a good sort of example. So if I click on that visibility score, that takes me down into that web presence, so into Global Sawmills, and specifically into the keywords that represent that visibility score. So this is a cluster of keywords. You'll see up here, the cluster is represented. This is our focus English keywords. For this particular client, because they've got multiple geographies they're interested in, they're a global manufacturer. So they've got multiple languages, but then they also have ways of differentiating their product. They consider it either, they have keywords that are related to mobile sawmills and some that are related to portable. So they can kind of configure and create these clusters based on, again, where they want to focus their attention. They've got some branded keywords as well. Maybe they want to look at only the branded keywords and how those are doing. But again, the idea of drilling down from that visibility score is into these details. So I can see, okay, what's causing my visibility score to drop or fall off. And it could very well be that it's this keyword down at the bottom that isn't currently ranking, or I've got others that maybe I was in position 1, but I've dropped off over time. And so from here, the idea is I can then drill down further into either a keyword or into a piece of content, and again, get some more insight into, okay, what steps should I take in terms of understanding what to do with that keyword or what to do with that piece of content. Does that make sense? Generally?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, it's like, from what I'm saying, it's really intuitive.
Perfect. That's great. Let's go back up then to the dashboard again. And this time we're going to jump from sort of this agency level dashboard down into the web presence specifically, and into another dashboard. And I'll give you a sense of that in 1 second. But one of the other things I'll point out at the agency level, because I mentioned it earlier and you talked about activities, I believe that was Matt. There's also a couple of agency level activity tracking beacons we have. These are meant to show either how much time has been spent on a client-by-client basis, how many activities have been completed, and how much time has been spent for a particular date range. Or this activity tracker over on the right is meant to show which, on a user-by-user basis, which particular activities are outstanding, are either outstanding or are completed, again, for any given date range. So this gives us a way of, really just staying on top of these activities. And I guess the other thing I should point out is this entire agency beacon can be configured so that it's specific to specific account managers. So if they're only responsible for specific clients, those are the only clients they'll see. Or maybe you want to have a more top level view where an administrator sees everything, right? They get to see all the clients and how they're all performing, and all of the users and what sort of outstanding, either on a monthly basis or for a specific date range.
Sure.
And so that's, again, all sort of an agency level dashboard. If this is something that's of interest, we can certainly talk through configuring and helping you guys make this available or implement this on your agency account. So from here, again, this is agency level dashboard. I can then also drill down from here into a specific web presence. And when we go to the web presence level, we start again at a dashboard. We've created this template of a web presence overview. What it's meant is to provide sort of a cross-section of data from different aspects of the presence. So for instance, we've got an analytics timeline, just to see how traffic and page views, conversions, bounces are trending for the period. We've also got, and again, with any dashboard, the goal is to provide sort of the top level view and then the ability to drill down into more detail. So for instance, if I looked at this and I saw that there was a spike or a drop, and I wanted to get a bit of more detail to try and understand kind of what exactly that means, I can drill down, for instance, into this by clicking on the beacon, and it takes me down into a more detailed view where I can see a breakdown, for instance, specifically by channel, and just a whole lot more detail on the traffic to this particular website. As you can see, anytime you see something in blue or highlighted, that means I can drill down farther, which means if I wanted to then specifically look at, for instance, conversions, I can click on conversions and go another level deeper and get a breakdown of all of the conversions that have occurred on this website over time or for a particular time. And what you'll see is really the dashboard is taking us into some of the deeper areas within the application. So I've gone from just an overview dashboard into content and analytics. And then from that, at a summary level, into a goals, down into a goals level. So it's always about kind of drilling down to that next level of data that hopefully helps me understand what's happening and enables me to be able to take some action or make a decision.
Right. Okay.
Makes sense? So back up to the overview dashboard, I generally spend a fair bit of time just on this dashboard alone, because again, this for us, if you're looking at any given client, is meant to be the starting point. So right across the top, if you need to follow keywords, you want to follow more on-site content or off-site content, these are the sort of manual ways of doing that. You want to follow more competitors, or you want to add some activities. You want to just note something that was done. You can go in, you can add those activities. So these are all sort of just manual buttons for being able to accomplish those things. Below that, again, we have the sort of performance data. So analytics data. What I'll also point out about the analytics data we're looking at here is one of the ties to activities. So anytime you see a timeline, whether it be this one or our competitive share of voice over here on the right, any activities that have been completed will show up within that timeline. And what we're looking to show here is any definitive or at least recognizable cause and effect. So activities can become things that aren't even necessarily SEO related. They might be, created a new page or a new section of the site. They might be, did an email blast, put out a press release, something where, we want to denote exactly when that activity occurred so that we can maybe relate it to something that happened on this timeline in terms of, again, traffic from an analytics perspective, or visibility. Or as we scroll down, there's another timeline here which shows us keyword cluster visibility. This is taking a look at our visibility score, and we're looking again for spikes. So if we did something at the beginning of the period and we saw a spike, we could presumably make some logical connection between the two. And again, that becomes a story we can tell or forward on to the client.
Sure.
So some analytics data timeline. The visibility score gauge, we drilled down from visibility score from that the agency level beacon we saw a moment ago, the web presence comparison. But this is more of a gauge to just give you a sense of how you're generally performing or relatively performing. And actually, I meant to do this. I'm still sitting in my demo account. Why don't I jump back over and we'll look more specifically at Bar Louie. So for Bar Louie, we'll jump into their presence data. And now we're working with a limited number of keywords. And again, this maybe needs to be a little better configured to give us a true sense of how things are performing. But same sort of use. We have some analytics that show us what type of traffic they're receiving over time. We've got, again, the visibility score. So this visibility score, just to be clear, what it reflects is based on the group of keywords or cluster of keywords you're following, along with the search engine, it's looking at the number of positions you maintain, and each one of those positions is given a weighted score. It's based on a click-through rate study that we found. So basically, anytime you're ranked number one, you get a score of about 33 or 33% estimated click-through. If you drop to the number two position, that drops to around 20%. Below that, 15, 12, and as we get down into page 2, page 3, page 4, that your score for that position is virtually null. But what we do is we take all of the positions for all of the keywords you maintain, and we aggregate them, add them up, and then divide them by the total possible score if you maintained every position. So sometimes the visibility score can seem a little penalizing, because unless it's difficult to maintain a really high visibility score, save for with branded keywords where you have a chance of maintaining every position or a majority of the positions. But it's also important to think about how you cluster and report on keywords, because that also affects ultimately the score. So to give you a sense, if I drill down on this score, it's based on these keywords, right? And right now in Google USA for this cluster, which in this case is just all keywords, you basically have 2 pieces of content that are ranking and then several that aren't. That's what brings that visibility score down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it becomes important which kind of which keywords if visibility score the score itself is important. I ultimately what I tend to recommend to a lot of clients is pay less attention to what the actual score is and more to whether or not it's going in the right direction, because it is meant to give you a sense of how things are trending, right?
Right.
And as I say, if this cluster was based on the keyword Bar Louie, that score would certainly go in the other direction, right? It would be an awful lot higher, because there you again have a chance of maintaining a significant number of positions based on your branded keyword.
Okay. Quick. So I have a question.
Sure.
So let's just say we're trying to rank for a certain keyword, but realize that certain keyword was either too broad or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And you decided to delete that keyword. Is that possible in this system?
Yeah, you can either delete or pause. Why don't we jump for
Okay.
that? We'll go to keywords and manage. And so anytime you're looking to manage, sort of do that sort of thing, manage keywords or change them, this is where all of your keywords live. So keywords manage, you'll see this is where we break out the clusters and which search engines you're tracking keywords in. Because the status here is all keywords, here's a list of all your keywords. At any point, if you want to figure out what cluster they're in, you click on this and it tells you that right now we have this one cluster or group called all keywords, and right now we're tracking this in Google US.
Okay.
Now, if at any point you want to change anything, you can click on, let's take the first one as the example, bar. From here, you can add it to an engine, add it to another engine, and maybe to be clear there as well. So what you have the opportunity to do is, if I click on add to engine, right now it's US that's available, but you can go in and add a new engine, and there are a variety of different engines. So Yahoo, Bing, again, I mentioned before, YouTube is an engine for us, a few overseas. But then from a Google perspective and a Bing perspective, we can also drill down by country. So if I want to know, US versus Canada versus any other country around the world, and if you find that there's a country that isn't represented, and there's an index that exists, just let us know through support@gshiftlabs.com. And if it exists, we'll get added. But let's say we want to understand, how the Bar Louie is performing for the term bar, not at just the Google US level, but at a specific city level. Let's say New York, for instance. We can also go in and add an engine that's a local engine. Or we potentially also go in and add a mobile engine. So we want to understand how they rank in New York on a mobile device. Then you can also choose mobile. And mobile allows you to go in and pick a specific location. And this, for that matter, even goes right down to latitude and longitude. But if I go New York, it'll zero in on the center of New York. But as you see, I could also pick, pretty much any major location. It goes by ultimately the latitude and longitude from a mobile perspective.
So this would be ideal for like local clients.
Yes.
We're trying to drill. Okay, cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, two ways to look at local clients. You can do the Google National or use the Google National engine and include your geographic identifier. So, best happy hour in New York. Alternatively, you can use the local engine and remove the geographic identifier and just say best happy hour, right? You're going to get the localized view of the position.
Okay, and how many local, I guess, like locations can you use? Can you track more than one?
As many as you like, but the only caveat is our pricing, our keyword pricing is based on, and the way we calculate the use of a keyword is based on the keyword times the number of engines. So the more engines you use, the more keywords you're effectively using of your allotment or of your allowance.
Okay.
So those numbers can obviously grow if you're doubling up on every keyword you're following, at multiple local levels. But yeah, there really is no As far as the software will allow you to hit a limit, and then you'll get a big warning message saying you've hit your allowance limit. The other thing I'll mention is if you've got some, specific clients in specific locations, and you find that, again, similar to the national, if you find that there's not a specific location that shows up, and let's say Newark, for instance. If Newark wasn't in our system, as long as there is a Google concept of Newark as a local result, then we can add that in as well. So again, you just let us know and we can add in that location. We'll look to find the SERPs for that.
Okay.
Okay. So that's kind of just a roundabout way. I'm going a little bit in circles here. So I would add in an engine. I would add that to New York if I want. So that's adding to an engine. I can likewise add any keywords to a cluster. And again, the clustering for us is really about helping to focus attention, right? So if I wanted to differentiate my happy hour keywords from my live music or restaurant keywords, I would create a cluster for each. And then when I go and look at my dashboard or I generate a report, I can focus them around those clusters. Make sense?
Okay. Yes.
That's really what clusters are about. It's just a way of grouping them to help, focus either your attention or a client's attention. You go to a client and say, we've spent the last 3 months focusing only on your restaurant related keywords, and here's the results. Right? Or again, I need to look at a dashboard, but I only want to look at restaurant related keywords because that's all I've been working on. I haven't been, spending time on the happy hour or the drink special keywords. So that's what the clusters ultimately enable you to do. All of yours right now, I think we put them into, or a few of them, we put them into all keywords. And that's fine. You can have an all keywords cluster, but what that sometimes tends to do is dilute the numbers you're looking at, because this is a good example where you've got a couple of keywords that are performing really well, but several that aren't. All that does is kind of pull all your numbers down and gives you a bit of a skewed view of what's really happening, or maybe that is the truth. That's just something you got to work on.
Right.
Last point then, and just get all the way back to your question, original question. If you want to at any point stop following a keyword altogether, you can select the keyword, you can hit change, and you can either unfollow, which means stop tracking it altogether, but you also lose the history, or what a lot of clients do is they'll pause. So we'll stop tracking, but you won't lose sight of that keyword. If at some point you wanted to resume or bring it back, because, okay, now I'm going to, spend the next 3 months looking at bar related keywords. I realized 3 months ago it was an uphill battle, so I had to, wait. You can pause and then resume at any point.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
Yep.
So let's go back out. I always start back out on overview. The next top level view we get is a competitive share of voice, and what this is meant to do is show you. First off, you would select or identify some competitors. Those again can be added in manually, or in a moment I'll show you how we can help identify some for you. But the configuration of this beacon, again, we've got this little gear up here in the top right. Right now, I think we've got Applebee's, the Outback, and TGI Fridays as competitors, so we can add those in to the configuration of this beacon. And maybe we'll also display activities in here. That should be turned on by default. So what this shows us is, where we are relative to those competitors. The line graph is meant to show the estimated organic traffic we're driving based on, again, a group of keywords we're following. And it's taking into account our position plus the search volume associated with those keywords. But then the percentages, again, they tend to, depending on the keywords you're following, be relatively low because it's a share of voice not just versus these competitors, but against everybody, everybody related to those keywords. So again, if you only maintain, a single position or 2 positions relative to 10 keywords and 5 pages worth of positions, that's going to give you a relatively low, quote unquote, share. Makes sense? Because there's lots of opportunity, obviously, for 10 keywords times 5 pages worth of visibility.
Right. So basically what this is doing is comparing it's basically comparing the traffic you have compared to the traffic that your competitors are getting.
Correct. And potential traffic. Yeah, potential traffic, potential organic traffic in search.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we'll scroll
Makes
down.
sense.
Yeah. So the next important part of this then is using this dashboard more from a discovery perspective. So I look at this top level to give me a general sense of how things are performing. Traffic's going up or down, keywords are going up or down. Here's how I'm doing relative to my competitors. And I want to obviously pay attention to the ones that are ahead of me. And again, maybe I should point this out too. With all of these, again, you can drill down. So here I see that Outback is outranking me. Well, what does that really mean? Well, I can click on Outback, and there's limited data in here, admittedly, but I can click on Outback and then get a sense of where I am relative to Outback. And I guess Outback was ranking at a certain point in time, but isn't currently. But what this is meant to do is show me actually 3 competitors that I want to compare myself to. So let's say Outback, Applebee's, and TGI Fridays. Here are the keywords. Here's the search volume. Here's where I'm ranked. And then if they maintained rank, it would tell me where they were ranked as well. Anything in green means I'm ahead. If I were behind any of them, it would be highlighted in red. And then depending on who I'm behind, they would be highlighted in yellow. So it's a quick way of giving you a sense of how things are generally performing. Maybe just to give you a better sense, I'm going to just click on our customer here, or our demo site. This is the same view. Oops, no, I looked at my own. Sorry, I didn't go into a competitor. 2 seconds. So let me click on this competitor. And we just choose a couple of competitors. So Timber King and Woodmiser US. Now this particular client kind of knocks it out of the park, so they're mostly green. But here's an example. So for one of their keywords, they're behind one of their competitors, and this is kind of the view you get. For a lot more clients, you might find that there's a lot more red and more yellow. So it's a good way of kind of quickly identifying again, where are the keywords I need to pay the most attention to relative to competition. This is also available in a report. So if you wanted to, create a report to send to the client and say, here's why we need to worry about some of this stuff. Here's where you are relative to your competitors. This sort of color-coded view of it's a pretty quick way of getting a sense of that. But we'll look at those reports, as I said, in our follow-on session.
Okay.
So back to the overview. So then the next important piece of this for us, oops, sorry, I'm going to go back to your overview. Keep forgetting that I bounce over to the demo. So for the Bar Louie overview dashboard, the next important piece of this is discovery. So it's always about, what is the next keyword, piece of content, or competitor I should be focusing in on. So there's a few different ways of doing keyword research within gShift. The first and primary is this discovered keywords beacon, again, as we call it. The way this beacon works, again, is all tied to a cluster. So we're taking that all keywords cluster, those 8 keywords that you're tracking, and we're going out and finding related keywords. So the keywords that show up at the bottom of the search engine results that are related to those keywords. And those are the ones that we present down the left-hand side, along with their search volume. So these become the keywords you might also want to be following to find out, is my client ranking for those keywords? And if so, where and what, what can I do about it? The other thing I'll point out, you can follow them within here, but you can also export this entire list if you want to, take it out, analyze it, and then kind of figure out what you want to do with it from there.
Okay.
But what this shows again is here's sort of the related keyword. So let's say restaurants near my location. There's your search volume. The competition, which comes again from Keywords AdWords Planner. And then what keyword is it related to? And sometimes you might find that you'll have multiple keywords in your cluster that the suggested keywords are related to. That makes them that much more relevant or potentially relevant. And from there, you can, again, eyeball and decide, check off the ones that make sense to follow. Or you might also find that there's some in here, let's say bar furniture, for instance, which isn't relevant, but it's related to bar just because that's a short tail term. You might want to ignore those ones so they don't keep showing up in your list.
Okay.
Makes sense. So that's a way of, again, identifying keywords. And again, as you follow related keywords, we go out and get the SERPs for those along with additional related keywords. So the ones that are related to those. So it kind of snowballs, if you will. The more you follow, the more relateds we go out and get. And it's about continually refining that list. Because presumably you're using some of these in, content that you're creating or, different ways that you're promoting or building the authority of that client site.
Okay.
All right. So that's, that's, as I mentioned, that's one of the keyword research tools. We can jump over, but if at some point you want to go into keywords and research, that's where you can also find some of the other tools that are available, like search queries from Search Console. We do still pull in keywords from Google Analytics, although I'm sure those are sort of few and far between. Most of that stuff is not provided. We do have a not provided tool as well, which helps to try and identify which keywords are driving traffic. And then down at the bottom of this dashboard, there's also, I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but an advanced discovered keywords beacon. This one takes a little bit more time to run, but basically you can drop any domain or URL you like in here. And this will go out and look at either a specific engine or all of the engines in our database. And so now we're talking about sort of millions of results and find keywords that domain's been found for. And that could be, and so a lot of clients, what they do is they'll put competitors' domains in here to see what they can find. Are there keywords that those competitors appear to be optimizing for or are being found for that we're not currently following, but we should probably be paying attention to? So that can that can be a pretty powerful keyword research component if you're looking for keywords you maybe hadn't even considered. Now it assumes that those competitors actually know what they're doing and that they're optimizing for the right things, but it can show some interesting results sometimes.
Okay.
But as they say, that one takes a couple minutes to run, so I generally leave that out of a training session. But you're welcome to kind of try that out and see. And again, it can be literally any domain. What I usually like to do, and we'll go back up to the top, is take some of these competitive domains we found, the ones again that are relevant to our client. I guess in this case, Yard House might make sense. So drop yardhouse.com in there and see what keywords come back. Before I get to those competitors, Ma'am Shat, any questions at all about the keyword side of things or research?
I'm good to go.
Good so far? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, so the one in the middle here, discovered content. This is about trying to identify that next piece of content you should follow. And I should explain, we've got this notion, you've probably already noticed, of following words or content or competitors. Again, following for us is about focusing attention. when it comes to following a piece of content, we're going to find and identify any piece of content that's associated with the domain. If it's ranking, or if it has traffic coming to it, or it has backlinks, we're going to be able to identify that for you. But in terms of actually following it and drilling down and getting more detail, we don't follow every single piece of content. So if you had 100 or 1,000 page website, you probably don't need to focus on every single page. So this notion of following that we have is really about helping to focus attention on just those pages, the 10 or 20 or 50 pages of a site that we really need to key in on. So this discovered content is really configured in three ways. The first and the default is show me content that's ranking for the keywords in my cluster. And so right now, I think we're tracking or following all of the pieces of content. There were really only 2 pages that we're ranking, the home page and I believe the locations page at this point for the keywords that you guys are tracking. So if there's nothing showing up, here in terms of ranked content, and maybe, again, let me just jump back over to my overview here. Here's an example in my demo site. There's a new page here, or a page that's ranking. It's a spring sale event. And for whatever reason, I'm not following it. It's ranking for the term portable sawmill for sale. And it's ranking in the number 7 position. So I might decide that, yeah, that is a page I should be paying more attention to. I would click on it and follow it. Or I could decide if that's just a campaign page, I don't really care, as much about it from an organic perspective, I could ignore it. Anything I ignore goes into a bucket, and we can always go back and revisit ignored keywords or ignored content or ignored competitors. But in this case, we're back on Bar Louie. We've kind of run out of pages that they have that are ranking for those keywords that we're paying attention to. So what we can do is we can change the attributes of this beacon by clicking that little gear. And instead, we want to look at the content type and change it from position to either analytics or backlinks. And what this means is show me content that has traffic coming to it or that has backlinks pointing at it. Because both of those are going to help me determine, are going to point out content that has value for me or that I should probably be paying attention to. So if I choose analytics and I update, now I'm basically just going to get a list of all of the pages on my site based on the number of, or the amount of traffic or page views they're getting. And so, for the group of keywords we're currently following, their menu page apparently isn't ranking, but obviously because it's getting so much traffic, it's probably a page we should be paying some attention to, we should be following. And then there's other pages, locations broken out by state, it looks like their contact us page. And these again are just their top visited pages. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. So basically this content, this discovered content is basically giving us an overview of what web pages are ranking,
yep,
and which ones we should follow or possibly follow.
Correct. Yeah, so which ones are ranking, which ones have traffic, or as I mentioned before, we can change this. So from analytics, we can change to backlinks and which ones have backlinks. Because the thought is, if it's ranking, we want to know about it, right? Because obviously it's got some visibility and some momentum to work on. If it has traffic, right, that means it's an important page. And if it has backlinks, that means somebody thought it was important enough to give it a backlink, and again, has some potential to rank. So I really, I typically want to follow those pages, again, that have that, that momentum or that opportunity to build their authority more. And I'll show you in a second, why we follow this content. But again, for us, it's just about, focusing. If again, you have any pages that are ranking or getting traffic or have backlinks, we're going to identify them for you, but then it's kind of more up to you to say, okay, of those, I don't want to follow, if we go back to the analytics, that was a good example, right? Under analytics, I'm going to update, and you've got 100 pages So probably 1,000 pages on this website. But which ones do you really want to pay attention to in terms of optimizing for search or optimizing for organic visibility, right? You want to start with the ones that have the most momentum or the most potential to drive traffic.
Okay.
That's really the notion of following, because sometimes I do understand people get a tough time they have a tough time wrapping their heads around it, but it's about that, getting back to that of focus.
It makes total sense.
Awesome, great. So last but not least, the discovery piece here is competitors. More often than not, a client will come and they'll say, I know I've got competitor A, B, C, and D, E, F, and they can add those in manually, right? And then we can get the side-by-side view of where we are relative to them. But what happens a lot of the time is they don't know who their online competitors are, or they think they know their competitors, and what happens online is a whole different story. So what this beacon is meant to do is take a look again at a group of keywords. It always starts with a group of keywords. Sorry, I clicked inadvertently there. Oh, let me go back. I must have clicked a couple times. Okay, back to overview. So this discovered competitors takes that group of keywords, in this case all keywords, and then goes out and finds the domains that are consistently showing up for those keywords. Anything that shows up 75% of the time, we consider that a strong quote-unquote competitor. Anything that's showing up between 75 and 25% of the time is average. And then below that's not even really hitting the radar, not enough of a competitor to worry about. So these domains are showing up somewhere between 25 and 75% of the time for the keyword cluster that we're following, the all keywords. So these 8 keywords, these domains are always showing up, or at least quite a bit of the time. And again, it's then, sort of an eyeball test to decide, is Yelp really a competitor or not? Probably not. Foursquare, likewise, probably not a competitor, so we probably want to ignore those. But as we go down through the list, again, Yard House probably is. And I'm not sure, not familiar enough with Timeout, but maybe Timeout is if it's a bar/restaurant, then that might be one we want to pay attention to as well. And so then you can pick and choose which of these you want to add as competitors or follow as competitors. Make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. And so then, once you've followed them as competitors, you can add them into places like this competitive share of voice. You can run reports against them. You can get that side-by-side view of where you are relative to them for specific keywords. And then kind of, make decisions from there. So that's the sort of the discovery piece. From there, this is about, again, trying to always refine and kind of reconfigure of our presence. From there, we get a bit more into then, as we scroll down, the performance of... Yeah, go ahead.
Matt?
Sorry. Was there a question there?
I have no clue.
No, okay. No problem. So from there, as we scroll down, it's we have 2 sections, one for top performing keywords and the next one for top performing content. And so this is now we're getting a bit more granular. We want to be able to quickly identify, what are my top performing keywords based on the ones I'm already following. 2 views of that. On the left-hand side is just a straight up position and volume comparison. And right now we're only tracking that one engine, but you can add multiple engines to this view. So if you wanted to go in and configure this and add in additional engines, you could get a side-by-side view of, for instance, how am I doing in New York versus Chicago versus LA, right, in a single beacon view. And It would give me my position, my change over time, or change versus the previous time period, and a search volume. Okay. At each of those levels. To the right of that, you've only got the one cluster in here right now, but if you had multiple clusters, if you had, again, restaurant keywords versus, live music keywords, for instance, and you wanted to be able to compare or figure out which of those clusters should I really be paying attention to? Which one is lagging behind, or where do I want to focus my attention? This is meant to provide a comparison of 2 or 3 or 4 or however many clusters you have. And then you can quickly, from there, again, drill down into the cluster. So I could click on this and I can see, I've got a cluster of keywords that are kind of going up and down over time. But I want to see how that's doing relative to, another cluster. Or I can just watch, follow the single one and see what the trend looks like. And then if I want to, understand where I am today, I can click on and drill down into, again, the specific details of that cluster.
Right.
So that's sort of a quick view of keyword position and keyword performance. Below that, we've got content performance. And so here we're looking at performance in 2 ways. On the left-hand side, it's based on visibility. And we saw from the visibility score and the drill down that we really only have a couple of pages that are ranking. Here again, we give you a sense of, and we have a rating of strong, average, or weak. Strong means ranking really well for a bunch of keywords. Average means, ranking okay for a bunch of keywords. And weak, obviously, ranking, but, probably only for a couple keywords and not all that well. And this is one of the primary sort of jump off points to figure out, okay, what to do next. Again, you can at any point drill down by any given keyword or any given piece of content. But from here, I might want to understand, okay, I see locations, it's categorized as weak. What exactly does that mean? Well, I'll click on it. And this shows me that right now for this, now I'm at the individual piece of content level. And it brings me directly to ranking keywords. So it shows me that I'm ranking currently for this single keyword. Now, if I were ranking for multiple keywords, those would all be listed along with their position, the previous position, what changed, what was the highest. We're looking at, just to be clear, a 30-day range, and we can change that to either 7 or 90 days. Over to the right, the search volume as well, to give us a sense of how much potential volume there is for that keyword.
So for this keyword, drink specials,
yep,
it's basically populating the locations page in Google or wherever it is. And then this is the keyword that's associated with this page.
Correct. It's saying
okay.
that this page is ranking currently number 7 for this keyword. And one of we've got 3 things we can do. You'll see there's 3 buttons here, and we've tried to kind of point you in the direction of, okay, what do we do next, or what's our next step? So the first might be, there's drink specials. Okay, it's doing okay. And I need to create some content around, drink specials or related keywords. So down at this individual keyword level, I can go into Discover, and that will show me all of the related keywords to drink specials. So at the bottom of, right, that gives me, interesting that they're all Tampa or Florida related, but this gives you some sense of what some related keywords are for that particular keyword. Alternatively, I might want to get a quick sense of what the top 50 search results is. So for that particular keyword, I see I'm in number 7 position, but what else is around me? So I can click the View Top 50, and that takes me into the top 50 positions. And again, we gather those on a daily basis, so you can look at the last week's worth. So we've moved now from being at the page level to the keyword level, and we're at a keyword and we're looking at the top 50. And this is showing me for this keyword, here are the current top 50 positions, some of which it looks like are local positions, which is interesting. And then below that, we're able to identify, there's our page. If there were any competitors, and it doesn't look like we have any competitors showing up, but if there were, they would be identified. Oops, sorry, I clicked again by accident. So if there were competitors identified, they would be highlighted. There would be an icon indicating they were a competitor. And one of the things you'll notice over to the right is you've got some follow buttons. This page is already being followed, but if there was another page, an on-site page piece of our part of our domain that wasn't being followed, you'd have a follow button so that you could make sure you're following it. Alternatively,
Okay.
I talked about way back when about off-site content. If there was a Yelp listing for Bar Louie or a Bar Louie page, some reference to Bar Louie that was external to the main Bar Louie site, you could click this follow button and you can follow that as off-site content. Now, the best way to do that typically is to start with a Bar Louie, a branded phrase, to find pieces of content that maybe are, again, in directories or, a Google My Business page. Typically the best way to start that is by looking branded. But you might find that there are some off-site pieces of content that are related, that are within the top 50 search results. And so to follow that, you would click on content and then follow it. You can give it a name if you like. Actually, I can walk you through that. Let's say, it isn't the case, but what if this Smoky Bones page was ours or had some relation to Bar Louie? I could click offsite content, and then that would take me to this offsite content page or view. There's the URL. We pick up the name based on the title of the page, but you can adjust that. You want it something friendly so you can recognize it. And then you can also put it into a category. And so this gives you a sense of what offsite content, again, is. So it can be a web page, it can be a press release, it can be a social account other than the ones you're already authenticating. It could be a blog post, a local or a directory listing. So any one of a number. It could be a video, a YouTube video maybe, or other video on a different video platform. So again, this offsite content is really just about understanding those other pieces of content we maintain that represent part of our presence. Make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might from time to time also, identify a competitor. Now that beacon I showed you earlier for discovering competitors, you shouldn't have to do a whole lot of individual competitor following within these results, but it's there if you want to. So you look and you say, oh yeah, there's a domain I definitely need to follow. You could also follow as a competitor.
Okay.
Then the last button here, you'll notice, actually, I'm going to take a step back. The other option you have then, so we can discover related keywords to drink specials, we can view the top 50, or we could look to get some recommendations on how to optimize this page for this particular keyword. And that's by hitting the optimize button. So optimize will allow us to do an analysis on this page, a simple technical SEO analysis that says, if you want this page to be found for the term drink specials, here's some of the things you might think about doing or incorporating into that page.
Okay. So can you go back and do that one more time?
Yeah, for sure. So if you drill down from any piece of content, once you get to this, yeah, so we're on the content page. There's two ways of getting to it. There's this optimize. That's part of a little flow we built, but you'll also see that under tasks, optimizer shows up here as well.
Okay.
If I click that optimize button, again, it's going to key in on that drink specials, but I could choose any keyword. If I decided, really that shouldn't be drink specials, it should be bar locations, and I have that keyword available to me, I could choose it, but we'll go with drink specials. When I click analyze, it basically looks at the page and says, from a technical SEO perspective, what are some of the basic things that we should think about doing? Right? And then from here, you do have an opportunity to check off any of these items that you decide that, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and, I want to make sure I do those things. Each one of them, you'll notice, also has a little bit of help to explain why it's important, why it matters.
Yeah.
But if I wanted to check off, say, yeah, I'm going to make sure that I add drink specials to an H2 or an H3 tag that's on this page, I could add that as an activity. I could assign it to someone. So let's say, it's Desmond. I'm going to assign it to Matt, and then I'm going to put a due date on it. This then becomes an activity for Matt to perform. Once he completes it, he can mark it as complete. And then if you remember way back to the beginning, those activities show up in our dashboard once they're complete.
Yeah.
Or we can include those in reports and report on them to our client that, hey, we did, these 5 things this month. And these are obviously very specific to a very, specific page, and they get assigned to that page. But that's kind of how an activity can work.
Okay.
Right. And so what we've done is we've drilled all the way down, again, from a dashboard to a page to a very specific, here's some action we can take on the page.
Right. Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Makes sense.
So we got about 15 minutes left. I covered most of what I typically would, on this overview dashboard. Any questions? I guess the other thing I'll point out then, sorry, one last thing, top performing content. So there's also content by analytics, and this is really just another quick way of getting to that. This is similar to the discovered content up here, but we wanted to give you another way of seeing what your top performing content is based on traffic, and a quick way of, again, following any of that if you need to. So this is really a replica of that one above, but it's just a quick way of getting to it. Again, if you run out of, average or weak pieces of content here and you want to quickly follow something, then the next piece, it's always about what's that next piece we gotta pay attention to. Just another way of getting at that.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's sort of the web presence overview dashboard. And again, the drill down from this is into some of these sort of underlying areas. The menu across the top gives you a sense of the other kind of areas, and you're welcome to go in and explore any of those. Where I would typically go from here is, as I mentioned, this is a templated dashboard. We've made available to basically everybody. It's our take on what represents sort of an overview of a presence. But this can also be custom configured. If you, in time, decide there's too much or not the right data here, we can work with you to figure out, okay, well, what is the data? What does help you, report or make better decisions for your clients? One of the things you're welcome to also go and take a look at is under dashboards, up here in the top menu. You can create your own dashboards. And so you can go in and you can add a new dashboard. And you'll notice now I have more templates available to me because I'm a super user. But when you click on new dashboard, we have a few templates that are available. The 5 down at the bottom are sort of the primary. There's a discovery dashboard, which is all discovery specific beacons or widgets. There's one that's all competitive or competition based data. There's one that has more keyword specific data, one based on content and one based on analytics. And just to give you a sense, I could choose this analytics dashboard. I can always either go with the dashboard, the template as it is, and create that dashboard, or I could create it as editable. If I go with an editable version, what's available to me is the ability to customize it. So you can see what we've done here is we've just got together a collection of, again, what we call beacons. These are all analytics related data. We've tried to give you a sense of what each one is and what question it's meant to answer. And then you can use this as a base, because you've created this as an editable dashboard, to go in and either add or remove. Once it's editable, up here at the top, you'll see I can click this edit and go into edit mode. And I can move, configure, or delete any of these beacons that we have. I can also go in and add additional. So this plus gives me access to a library of about 60 different beacons that we've created. And again, you'll see that there's a categorization down the left-hand side here. They're for different purposes, whether it be, again, analytics or competitive or content, discovery, keywords, a whole number of different ones that you can choose from. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on that today, because you're probably at this point getting overwhelmed. But suffice it to say, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of figuring out what data you need and want to be able to use to be able to make some decisions or be able to effectively report to your clients. The other thing I'll mention about dashboards is there's also the potential to provide access to your clients to these dashboards on a read-only basis. So if you wanted to think about, configuring a dashboard that the client could log in and see, as much or as little of this data, sometimes the notion of giving a client access is a little bit scary. I understand that. And just reporting to on a regular basis makes more sense. But that's also a possibility.
So could we give them access to actually get on the dashboard and create reports themselves?
Yeah, that's a possibility as well. And really, for us, just to differentiate, there's two types of reports or two ways of looking at the data. So dashboards, and then reports are separate. For us, I'll show you this the next time around. There's a fully configurable reporting infrastructure, and those reports typically are configured and then either run ad hoc or can be scheduled to be run automatically, either on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis.
Nice.
But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, they could potentially get access. And maybe one of the other things I'll show you while we're here is that for any of these dashboards, if you need to get a quick view of this data, maybe somebody said, pass me or send me our traffic timeline or a breakdown of traffic by channel. You've got a snapshot button here, and you could take an image, a quick JPEG image of any of these bits of data. In some cases where it's tabular, the keyword lookup data and some of the discovery stuff, you can also export it out as an Excel doc. So you'll see up in the top right-hand corner either a configuration icon, a snapshot icon, or sometimes there'll be a download or an Excel icon.
Sorry. That makes sense.
To download. The other thing I'll point out, the last thing on the dashboard side then is you can also export these entire dashboards as PDFs or create a PDF of a dashboard. So we've got some clients that set these up to effectively become reports. That means making sure they're laid out properly and they look a little nicer than this. You might want to throw your client logo or your own logo into it, but that's also a potential. Right, and you can create a template at the agency level and then make that report available throughout the entire agency.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of flexibility with dashboards. The next piece I wanted to touch on, and we got again only about 10 minutes left there. How are you guys for time? If we can go a little bit over, I could take a look at. I was going to look at our site audit as well as our backlink section if we have time for that.
I don't even think Matt's still on, but I have time.
Okay. Great. Well, why don't we do that then? So two ways of getting to the audit side of things. When you first come into your presence, as we saw before, there's this blue site audit button. And so that will take you directly to our site audit section. But it also lives under content and site audit. So it's the last section in our content section. But then there's also a site audit under competition. And the only reason we put it in both places is if you create an audit under content, you get to choose your website as the domain to be audited. Whereas if you do it through competition, you get to choose your competitors' domains.
Okay.
Now you also always have the opportunity. So if I create a new site audit here, I can add in, choose my website. That's what I want to crawl and audit, or I can go crawl any custom URL. So if there's an affiliated site, really you've no limit on what websites you can crawl. More often than not, though, I would assume that you want to crawl your own site.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then you can choose what you want to crawl. So one of the parts of your contract is the number of audits. I believe you have 40 audits a month that you can run, and the number of resources. So resources for us, you'll see are pages, images, JavaScript, style sheets, or PDFs. All of those things are items that can be crawled and indexed through the crawl. So depending on what you're looking to accomplish in terms of your audit, we turn everything on by default, but a lot of clients, they might only look at pages, for instance. And then in order to kind of maintain or control the number of resources, you'll see that we also have a website size or crawl size that you can set. The default is the default's 1,000, but you can also run a small, which is 400, or even an extra small, which is only 25 resources. This one usually is if you've got a templated site where that it's likely going to be the same issues on every single page. You have that, and if you're looking just to get a real quick snapshot of what's going on, if you think there are definitively issues, then you can run extra small or small.
Okay.
There are some advanced options here too, which you may or may not want to turn on. These things are all defaulted in terms of the user agent that's crawling, and you'll see that you can crawl based on different user agents. Sometimes people want to get a sense of what a crawl looks like if it were crawled by Googlebot as opposed to our bot, and how the site reacts to that. Right, so it's something you can adjust. More often than not, again, just going with our standard is fine. You might, though, depending on firewalls and things, want to make sure you're identifying that this bot is crawling the site. The throttling and concurrency really just have to do with the load that you're putting on the server when you're crawling. If if you're concerned about server load, then you then you leave it where it is. If you're fine with us hammering the site or the server, you can adjust these downwards. So no throttling and crawl. You can have 7 concurrent crawlers going at the same time. Makes the crawl go much quicker, makes the site audit go much quicker, but puts a lot of strain on the server.
Right.
And then the last piece, you can set custom filters. This is when you want to be very specific. If you only want to crawl a certain section of the site or exclude a certain section of the site, or if you're savvy with regular expressions and you want to be very specific about what pages within a site you crawl or what types of pages, then you can be very very detailed. And then from here, you have the option again of either running this audit now, or you can also schedule a site audit. And that means scheduling a site audit so that maybe it runs, once a week, once a month, once a quarter, whatever the case may be, automatically.
You said how many site audits do we get?
You have 40 for 40 per month, and that resets every month.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And if that's not enough, just you let us know, and we can look to bump that.
Okay.
Once an audit's been run, looks like we have one that was run here on the Outback. Let's take a look, just out of curiosity. What it generates is a prioritized list of recommendations. Things that are considered critical. So missing titles, missing H1s are important. Things that are considered sort of medium importance, titles that are too long or duplicated H1s, they're not gonna kill you, but they're also not good. And then sort of the lower hanging fruit stuff. And from there, we just give you a more detailed summary. Now, if you want to sort of interact and sort of add activities or maintain within gShift, you could, for instance, go in and see that we've got 778 missing H1 headings. I can click on that, and it would take me down another level to where I'd see the detailed list of pages missing headings. And I could check those off and turn them into activities to be completed. Very much the same as we saw with the activities on the optimizer, the page specific. So this is site as opposed to page specific. And so those activities, okay. And so just give you an example. So I could, grab a couple of activities. There's site audit relating, the description's filled in for you. You can define the category if there's categories, and then pick who you want to assign, again, those two. Now that's using and sort of managing those activities within gShift. The other option you have is to create a report based on this audit. Now, that was an awfully large audit, awful lot of recommendations. So you can pick and choose exactly what you want to include in the report. Depending on who this is going to, this report is probably a couple hundred pages long because it had so many issues. But if you wanted to distill it down, you could say, only show the pages missing titles, the ones missing H1s, the ones missing meta descriptions, for instance, right? We can turn a whole lot of this stuff on or off, whatever we think is
okay.
And then from there, run again or schedule for later. Once a report's been run, and I'm going to assume a report wasn't run.
How do we get to that?
Sorry?
How do we get to that where we're able to edit it one more time?
Yeah, no problem. We go all the way back. So we run our audit. Oh, let me just jumping a little too quick. So yeah, we've run the audit.
Okay.
And sorry. So there's the audit. Once we're in viewing it, any audits that have been run, we can go create a report up in the top right-hand corner.
Okay.
And then that provides us with a configuration.
Cool.
Yeah.
And could we do this without running the audit?
You have to configure it the first time. So once you run the audit, there has to be some audit to refer to. So you'll have to run it at least one time, right? Once you have an audit reference, then you can, or when you first create that, you can schedule it. So let me go back and kind of show you that. So let's go all the way back here. So when I first create a new audit, I go through and I define, how large it's going to be and what I want to include in the audit. Then I go to schedule site audit report rather than running it. And what that does is you give the report a name. You define what format you want the report in. So a PDF is obviously a PDF, not something we can really work with. It's better for if you're sending the report to the client to say, here's the issues we identified. Right. If you want to have it as a working document, you can have an Excel doc. You can generate it as an Excel doc. And a lot of the clients use this because they, generate the audit and then they can quickly go in and have an Excel doc, a list of all of the pages missing titles, or a list of all the pages that have titles that are too long. And then they can use, another column of that Excel doc to list out all of the changes they want to make.
Okay.
right? For anything scheduled, you can define where you want it delivered to. So put in an email address, either, and they don't have to be a gShift user. You can send this literally to anyone. Although, in order to get to the report, actually the report is sent to the user, so they don't have to be a user. But if they want to log in and get to the report, then you need to obviously make sure they're a user.
Right.
And then you can define a schedule. Is it every day, a specific day of the week if you want to run one weekly, or a specific day of the month if you want to run one monthly?
Okay.
Okay. And we'll go through this report stuff in a whole lot more detail in our next session. As you can see, there's a bunch of different reports available to you. This one is just a specific follow-on to the site audit.
Okay.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right. So last but not least, then, I was going to talk a little bit about backlinks. So within gShift, there's a couple of backlink services. Out of the box, we offer our own backlink service, which is admittedly limited in that we rely on looking at Google Analytics for referral traffic and or any other backlinks we can find that effectively driving traffic to the site. Our preference, our recommendation typically is we have an integration with Majestic SEO.
Right.
Don't know if you guys are using Majestic, or maybe I should ask, what if any backlink service are you guys using or have used?
I don't think that we are currently using any backlink service right now.
Okay, fair enough. So this may or may not be a moot point, but so there is, without Majestic, there is some backlink data that we made available. You saw some backlinks earlier for Bar Louie, but you can see sort of here the difference between the number of backlinks we're able to find for Bar Louie and the number that Majestic's able to find.
Right.
Majestic is crawling the entire internet. We made a decision a few years back that we didn't want to get into that business. There's a lot of good backlink providers out there. So we spent some time, did some due diligence, and decided on Majestic as the one we would integrate with. If this is something, you're in need of some detailed backlink data, then I recommend taking a look at Majestic. It is a separate service. There's a separate contract, but something to think about. That being said, if you don't have the connection to Majestic, there are still, as I mentioned, some backlinks here. And there's a couple of ways that we look at sort of backlink research and identifying backlinks. So we have, first off, the backlinks for Bar Louie specifically, the client. And you'll see we kind of break out what are the backlinks we've found, where are they? And this is really about sort of validation. Are they real? Are they up to date? That's the sort of work you're typically doing when you're looking at a client's existing backlinks. Alternatively, we have competitive backlinks. And this is more, backlink research to see where competitors, and we're, for instance, for Applebee's, we have actually been able to find almost 2,000 backlinks. And so this is about, kind of seeing where competitors would appear to be advertising, where they have inbound links, and potentially piggybacking on the back of some of those same places. And there's really no way around it. Backlinking is a tedious manual effort. But we sort of make that data available to you to be able to identify where those competitors' backlinks are.
Okay.
Make sense?
Cool. Yes.
Yeah. The other option from a backlink research perspective that I'll give you, that I always recommend to clients, is to think about looking at backlinks from a keyword perspective. And by that I mean, if, for instance, you wanted to try and identify backlinking sources for a keyword like drink specials, one of the best places to start is way back on that top 50 search results page we saw before. So I would drill down to keyword I would look at the top 50 search results, and I would try to identify anything that's non-competitive that I could potentially get a backlink from.
Okay.
Because by definition, for the term drink specials, these are the most relevant potential backlinking sources there are. Right? Google
Right.
says these are the top sort of authority pages for the term drink specials. That's one of the places I would start if I were looking to do backlink research, based on my own keywords, right? So I'm looking, particularly if I'm not already on page one, I'm looking for entry points into page one. If there are, directories or blogs that I can comment on, or different ways of getting those highly relevant, higher authority links. They're tied to my keywords, so I know they must be, again, by definition, relevant.
Exactly. So basically, places that are promoting almost, or put, and then you go on there. Let's just say if it's like a blog or something, you can pretty much backlink it to your site to say, okay, this is where we may be located, or this is how to get to our site, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, typically that's a reach out to the blog owner and saying, hey, would you be willing to put a link on your site? Or, and sometimes it might be, a paid directory, whatever the case may be. And here's a good example. There's, Yelp. If you see Yelp as on page one, sometimes we use it as justification. People say, should we get a Yellow Pages ad? Well, is Yellow Pages on page one? If they are, then you get some visibility as well as a good potential backlink. If they're not, then it's probably not worth the money, right? If they're not being found for the keywords you want to be found for, how can you expect them to help you?
Exactly. Okay.
That's usually my take on backlinks and directories in general from a local perspective.
Okay.
So
all right, that makes sense.
That's a whole bunch of stuff in a relatively short period of time. And again, I don't want to overwhelm you too much if I haven't already. So what I'll suggest is we stop there. I've got a recording, and as I mentioned, I'll send that along. I've also got some additional info we usually send along after sort of our second session, some resources, along with links to the certification program that I mentioned that, I highly recommend that you or whoever else in the team have a look at. And it's a lot of it's kind of the stuff that we've been covering, but it's there as a good resource and a way of just, again, ensuring that you're, comprehending and getting the content, and always available to you just as a reference point again. So I'll send links to that. And, if you have any questions in the meantime, just, absolutely reach out, let us know. What we can do is, I know Matt was, interested in getting rolling. So if you want to set up a follow-on for a reporting session, that's typically what we'll do next. In the next few days, just let me know what makes sense once you've had a time to digest this, and we'll look to go through reports.
Okay. That sounds good. I'll contact him and have him either give you a response, or he'll have me respond to you about a day that works best, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Any other questions, Desmond?
No, this is pretty much awesome. It makes my job 10 times easier, but it also makes it where I actually know where the heck to go. So I got a lot more work, but it makes it easier.
Yeah, trust me, in time. I know it seems like there's an awful lot, but we will definitely try to help to whittle it down to where it's kind of simple and repeatable. Go to the same places, look for the same stuff, and then it's a matter of how much do you want to drill in to get more. So hopefully this it clicks for you.
Alrighty. Well, it was great. Thank you so much.